Peace and blessings, family, and welcome to Labors of Love podcast. We are here to inspire, uplift, and enlighten. Each episode, we will be hearing from Black midwives, doulas, and other traditional childbirth supporters who have dedicated their lives to being of service to Black mothers and families in all aspects of the motherhood journey. I am your host, Hafeeza Ture, and this evening I have the pleasure of speaking with Erica McAfee. Erica is the founder and CEO of Sisters in Loss, a maternal child health company that helps Black women replace silence with storytelling around pregnancy, infant loss, and infertility. Sisters in Loss provides pregnancy, birth, postpartum, bereavement, and grief services to help women step beyond anxiety and fear and into trust and peace after loss. Its self-titled podcast spotlights resilient Black mothers who share intimate details of their journey to motherhood through painful but inspirational loss and infertility stories. Sisters in Loss has been featured in Black Enterprise, Women's Health, The Today Show, NBC Universal, and U.S. House of Representatives via VA State House 4. Erica is a member of MOMMAs Voices in Racial Disparity Committee of the Preeclampsia Foundation. She is a certified birth and bereavement doula, Doula Trainer and Mentor, and mom of 2 babies in heaven and 1 rainbow baby. Maxwell, also known as Super Mighty Max. Erica is an alumna of Virginia Commonwealth University with a Bachelor's of Science in Chemical Engineering. I am so grateful and honored to welcome to our platform, Erica McAfee.
I can't hear you. Yeah, are you muted?
Thank you. Yes. Oh my gosh. It has been an interesting evening, but I am so thankful and grateful that you are able to get on today and that we have this much needed conversation. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me here.
Amazing. Amazing. I love the colors. It's almost like we're coordinated here.
Oh, yeah.
So I appreciate that. But I just definitely want to honor time and jump right into this much needed conversation. I'm grateful that you are able to come on the platform and share with us about the amazing work that you are doing, supporting mothers, allowing us to tell our stories, and even when they're challenging, to give us a platform and a voice to do so. So your work is just, it really is truly phenomenal. When I had an opportunity to kind of dig in a little bit to find out a little bit about who you are. So I'm excited about the audience to really get to know who you are and the work that you're doing and kind of what inspired this work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm excited to share with your audience.
Good. So just to get started, you are the founder and host of Sisters in Loss. And I was able to see the progression of the podcast. I listened to the first one, and then I listened to the 193rd one, I believe was the last one. So again, amazing work. So what, can you share with us what your story is and kind of what brought you to this calling of sharing your story and the stories of others?
Absolutely. So obviously with the podcast, it was just a way of me having an outlet to continue on sharing my story. I have been sharing my story on social media since I lost my 2 babies. I lost a son at birth. He was full term, 39 weeks in 2012. And then that following year, I got pregnant again and then lost a daughter at 18 weeks. And throughout that journey of really trying to understand what grief and healing look like out loud, I shared a lot on my personal social media and just found community within the friends and the associates that I had on Facebook that may have experienced loss in some shape or form, whether it was a miscarriage or people who've lost babies due to SIDS, and just folks within my family, and cousins and second cousins, and people had not really shared their stories in that manner. So fast forward when I got pregnant with my rainbow baby and went through, which is a baby you have after, your storm of losses. I knew that journey needed to be shared in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, I didn't know how it's going to be shared, and I wasn't even considering podcasts at that point in time. It wasn't until after my son was born and I had moved back home, had a longer commute to work, and I had to navigate being in a car for more than an hour, and I started to fall in love with podcasts. Obviously, I wasn't even listening to podcasts that were focused on maternal health at that time. This was back in 2014. And that's when podcasts really started to pick up steam. Obviously, now everybody got a podcast. Obama got one now, So like it's a more taboo thing to do. It's something that everyone has now compared to back, 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
When it was just starting to really pick up steam, and there were more advertising dollars that were pouring into small independent shows. So as well as large scale shows as well, who are with, podcast agencies and things of that nature. But I wasn't even really into it. I just knew that I loved listening to podcasts because they got me through, driving to work and driving home. And it really wasn't until the summer of 2017, it was 3 years later, that I actually was just like, I had like a big awakening on the beach in Cuba. I had right after the past president got elected, I was just like, we got to go to Cuba before they shut down these borders. Right. So we went to Cuba as a vacation. We stayed there for 7 days, and we went down from Havana to Trinidad de Cuba, which is the southern part of Cuba, and it's another part of the Caribbean that hasn't really been touched. So it was really good to see an old town where a lot of African ancestors, had started out there before they migrated north to, the Havanas, and started life in a bigger city. So on that beach is when, I really felt the call to start a podcast sharing my story and my journey, and really documenting how I was going to navigate the journey through infertility. As with my rainbow baby, I had a maternal near miss. I almost lost my life having him. And as a result of that placenta abruption, the doctors had to give me a hysterectomy. So I had an emergency C-section hysterectomy. So I knew, obviously I knew going into, once we got past a certain point in, my son growing up, that if we wanted to start grow our family again, we would have to use alternative methods. And I really wanted to find other Black women who have done that and share their stories, kind of for my own gain, to learn more and have somebody to relate to, but to also show people that there are options out there to becoming a mother. And the journey is not always linear for some people. It's an up and down, and the path is not always what is to be expected. But ultimately, if we really truly want to become parents, that we should be open and think about all the options that are available, and do not allow any obstacles or barriers, even financial barriers, deter us from achieving that goal. So I like to really really preach that message on the podcast, especially as it's evolved. Obviously, you listen back to the first episode, which is about my story. And then obviously it's evolved so much then, we've introduced over the last couple of years, talking more about gestational carriers and fertility awareness and, donor eggs and donor sperm and, being a single mother by choice and abortion, and really talking about that as well, where we've opened up the context of actually what we're talking about and really getting down into really what grief and healing looks like for each of us, and how do we explore that? How do we navigate that? How does that play a role in the faith that we have? And how do we navigate our relationships? I think that's a big part of it. It's not just the relationship with your partner, but it's also a relationship with your family, with your friends, because ultimately they're grieving too. They're grieving this loss that was had as a family, as a collective. And I really wanted to highlight and showcase that. And, I always tell my community, it's hard work to hear these stories every time. It's not easy to process all of the deep and dark and painful moments that people have experienced. And, I'm just bawling and crying as the other person on the other end is, but I know that it's healing. It's healing. It's cathartic. It's good for people to just let it out. A lot of people who have had these stories buried deep down in their hearts, and they haven't had the opportunity to share it in its entirety. Yeah. So to sit and actually do that in this podcast form, to have a safe place where you can be vulnerable and be transparent, and then listen to as how people have navigated that journey, brings comfort and healing to people in a way that they may not have thought they needed it until they listened and they're like, oh my gosh. So even with each of the stories, obviously they're vast majority and all different stories with different angles. But, the common goal or the commonality in all of them is we all have to find and fight our way to find healing after loss. And it may look differently for each and every one of us, but we all are going to find our path to get there.
That is truly, truly phenomenal. And just, hearing you and hearing the passion in your voice and just really connecting with that, like the healing aspect of it in the work that it is that you do. And just how by sharing your story, how it gives courage to other people to express themselves and also to normalize the conversation, because I like what you said about how we hold on to things, how there's things that we've never spoken about. And a lot of times it's uncommon to have, conversations about miscarriage or, fertility issues or things of that nature that so many of us have experienced. So I find great value in just hearing the stories. And like you said, all the stories are different, but all of them have a common thread as well. So it's like this connective thing that you can relate and you can empathize and you can grow from the information. And we can't talk about this enough, so to be on 193, episodes is so awesome.
Crazy. I know I was working on 200 today, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is 200, obviously not all interviews get played on the podcast, but I've interviewed over 300 families over the past 2 years. And it's been an honor. And as much as I like to say, oh my gosh, I'm going to stop doing this because it's just so hard work, you go back and look at some other podcasts that do the similar work, they probably have stopped by now because it's just that difficult to do. But I know that, obviously there is a lot of fear out there for a lot of birthers in general about what they've seen with the maternal mortality crisis that's happening here in the US as well as around the world. And I really want to remove that fear from people, and let people know that they can have safe places where they can birth. They have autonomy over their birth. They can be affirmed, and they can be their biggest advocates on how they want to birth, especially for those who are experiencing a pregnancy after a loss. So I think that we just want to make sure that people have that safe place to go and they can go back and dig in the archives and find an episode that they can relate to, and listen to that woman or that man or that couple really pour out.
And that is amazing. And I'm glad that you referenced to just supporting mothers. You became a doula. When did that happen? And how does your personal experience impact how you provide for or support other mothers and families?
I always say that I feel like I've always been a doula.
Yeah.
I feel like I've been called to this work for a long time. Obviously, you know, I feel like my doula work started after my loss. Really being able to support my family and my friends who were navigating losses after I lost my son. But traditionally, I guess when I actually took formal training, it was in 2017. And I've taken subsequent training since then too, just to make sure, you know, advanced training, just to keep up on just what's going on. But ultimately, I feel like I was kind of called to this, especially when people were leaning on me for emotional support as they navigated after their miscarriages or during their miscarriages, especially if they miscarried at home or if they were miscarrying at work. And then navigating what does that look like after they had a pregnancy. And then when they had another pregnancy, because they were scared they may miscarry again, you know. So I feel like, you know, especially with my family and friends, that's where the birth work started for me. And then ultimately, you know, after I took my training, I was getting called to support a lot of families in pregnancies after loss. And then one summer in 2018, 2018 and 2019 were just like a takeoff year, because a lot that, you know, the hospital that was in my local area, they were losing a baby a day, you know, so we were getting a lot of calls about, you know, being bereavement support for families, and it was overwhelming. And then what I realized is that a lot of birth workers may not really specialize in bereavement. So a lot of birth workers in the area were calling me to help their clients who may have been experiencing, you know, a second trimester loss or miscarriage or a stillbirth. And I'm coming in and I'm helping that doula support their clients. And I feel like it was just a huge need to do some more education around bereavement and really what bereavement care really looks like from a doula's perspective, but also for those who are advocates who are out there, you know, other health workers, other social workers and therapists, and really how can they navigate bereavement as a whole and have those conversations with people as they transition and navigate through the system. Because obviously every system is different at every hospital, every clinic, every facility, but not everyone has structure in place on what to do when someone comes in and they're pregnant and their baby passes away, or they may be actually going through a miscarriage. You know, a lot of folks just shun people off and send them home, which is not, and then send them home with the wrong information. So, you know, we want to make sure that, my goal really in the pandemic is really when I launched our doula education program, where we really wanted to make sure that the doulas that we train with sisters in loss can really go out there and make an immediate impact in their community, where they can go to their local hospital and say, hey, you know, these are the gaps that you have. This is how you can support us through bereavement, so that, you know, when someone comes in an emergency room, they aren't just sent home, especially when they may actually be, you know, miscarrying, birthing this baby, and not giving them the proper instructions on what to do. How do they discard the remains of the baby? You know, what do they do in those situations? And, you know, if you I'm sure you've heard some podcasts, a lot of the podcasts, women are doing all of this alone and are getting that support that they need. And I knew that was a big gap that I wanted to make sure that we fulfilled. So, really over the last year, it's been almost a full year now, we've trained over 150 doulas to go out there and do that work in their community. Not necessarily just in bereavement. Obviously, we train full spectrum, but really with a focus on bereavement and supporting loss in any trimester, whether it's the first, second, or third, or even in the postpartum period.
Wow. Now that is significant work, and that's definitely brings light to how are you adjusting during the pandemic and still being able to obviously train as well as provide services. So for our audience, what services do you provide? I know you mentioned from the bereavement perspective and the support, and what trainings do you offer?
Absolutely. So we offer a full spectrum doula course. It's an 8-week virtual training where we provide, it's live. So, and we provide, birth, bereavement, and postpartum training in that 8 weeks, as well as really how to start your business or nonprofit as well. So that's an 8-week training we do once a quarter. We also provide a bereavement support course that is mainly for, your therapists, your social workers, your advocates or activists, your maternal health advocates or activists who really want to know how can I do bereavement support beyond just being a doula, especially if people may not want to go the doula route, which is a more specific niche. So these are more for your professionals on how they can bring in more bereavement support into what they do in their everyday jobs. And then obviously, as a doula myself, I have clients that I've had to switch over from being in person to virtual. So the virtual support has grown for me really over the last year, because now that we're doing mostly, a lot of folks want to have a virtual doula. I can support people all over the world, really, which has been awesome. And I can actually take on more clients, obviously, than I normally would a month, based on the estimated due date, just because a lot of them are virtual. So that's been, I have clients in Washington State, California, Indiana, Massachusetts, Florida. Got clients all over the US that are birthing babies in 2021. So it's been a blessing to be able to do the virtual support, no different than what we're doing here, where I actually get to see them, and then we get them set up where they're set up in the labor and delivery room with the camera. We are watching them, helping their partner to do all of the physical work while they're in labor and delivery, and then being able to support them at home during postpartum as well.
Wow, that is amazing. So we do have a comment coming in from Angela. She says, my daughter is a social worker also and has interest in bereavement work as a doula. Any educational resources you'd recommend?
Yes. There's a few books that I love that are focused on bereavement work. One of the book is called Companioning at a Time of Perinatal Loss. If you would probably just go put that in Amazon, they actually have a accompanying workbook that is actually a bereavement care workbook. Both of those books are perfect for social workers and therapists. And it's what I recommend all of my doulas to have in their library so that they can reference back to on really how to navigate grief and healing, and really tap into that emotional intelligence portion to make sure that their clients are doing what they should be doing as they navigate the journey. So both of those books are great. They're the workbook is even better, especially if your daughter is a social worker, because that workbook actually gives direct actions, checklists, handouts that they can actually provide from a bereavement perspective, or guides on things that they could create for her practice as a social worker.
Wow. And that is so significant. Is there more information for people who are listening, who want to find out more, who want to tap into your service, your website, when the podcast air? Angela says, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. Just how do they connect with you? How do they Yes, get in touch.
Yeah, so sistersinloss.com is our website. You can find all our information there. And for more information about our courses, they can go to bereavementdoulatraining.com.
We will definitely include that into the comments so that they have and be able to just click on the link and get in touch with you. I definitely like to close out with, a story of, maybe a mother or a family that you've supported and, that kind of confirmed for you that this is definitely, your calling and just epitomizes why it is that you do this work.
Oh my goodness. So many stories. Goodness.
Sure.
I guess the biggest one is last year. Two of my best friends both were navigating fertility journeys and both had babies. And to see, obviously, they were there to support me through my losses, and to see them and to be there for them to help them navigate, fibroids, endometriosis, just all of the above, which a lot of Black women face, and the challenges they face when it comes to fertility, to get pregnant, to go through pregnancy in a pandemic, right?
Right.
And to just be there for them as they navigated that journey, but then also to feel their joy as they brought babies home. So I felt like it was a full circle moment for us, for our circle group, just because we all have been there for each other through different levels and different steps. And then they were kind of the last two in our group to actually have babies. So that ultimately will always touch my heart, because, they both did it with such style and grace. And obviously there was a lot of challenges and ups and downs throughout the journey, but to see their babies growing now, one is 3, almost 4 months, and the other one is 8 months. And it's a blessing to see their babies start to grow up in the light. And obviously I think that, the pandemic slowed everybody down, but I think for a lot of new moms in 2020, although there was a lot of isolation, you would never get that time back. So I always try to remind my families and my friends that the first year of life, you never get that time back. So it's a blessing that this world slowed down in 2020 so that you can have the opportunity to see your child grow every single day and not have to actually physically go to work every day. And you don't get that time back with those babies at that age. So it's been a blessing to watch their babies grow. And it's still going to be a blessing, obviously.
Yes, as it continues.
That's been my favorite. It's been my favorite to be able to actually see, to actually hold, to actually manifest the miracles of just the prayers that we've prayed for so many years for my best friends.
Oh, wow. That is a beautiful story, and definitely a wonderful note to leave off on. I just want to truly thank you for your time and your insight and your energy. It really is. It comes through. And I just see how much you care about this work, and just to be able to tell the other sides of the story. I know a lot of times when we're having these kind of platforms, we want to normalize the conversation around birth, but there's so many layers to it. And we don't always talk about some of the more challenging conversations to have, even though there's a lot of other things, as far as like you mentioned, the maternal morbidity rates and things of that nature. But there's so many layers as mothers, as Black women, that we are, having to navigate. So the resource that you provide, the support that you provide. And I know for me, didn't even know that this kind of support was out there. So just really wanting to normalize this conversation, let people know that there is support. There's someone who can, be a part of this healing process with them. Definitely want to make sure that your information is out there and getting disseminated so that it reaches those who need it most. But I truly appreciate your time. I'm glad you were able to jump on. This has just been an awesome experience for me. So thank you. You
are so welcome. And thank you all for listening and those who are watching.
Yes. So please tune in next week. Again, thank you, Erica McAfee, for being on the show with Sisters in Loss. Again, we'll have that information in the comments. So definitely reach out and connect. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for your comments and your questions and your support. We will be back in April for another episode. So please tune in. You are appreciated. Peace and blessings, family.